that to thank everyone, thank our speakers tonight, and for the very insightful and useful talks. And I am going to try and figure out how we can find questions. Has any?
Yeah, I found some questions on chat.
Can you please go ahead and address them? The ones that
yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I could address a couple of questions. Or Sister Nikita wants to start.
Excuse me, sorry, just a dry cough, not a real, nothing to be alarmed about, everyone. I just need some water. One of the just comments that I noticed for myself in the Q&A, and then I had noticed you had a lot more questions, so I'll just quickly address it, is that people were saying, you know, if you're holding space for someone has to be aware of how much space that they can hold, which is absolutely, knowing your limits is essential when it comes to helping support people's mental health. Part of that is going on your own healing mental health journey, being able to cultivate dual awareness, being able to not enmesh with particular emotional states. And to be able to check in with yourself even while you're simultaneously talking to somebody. I think that's really an important skill that is learned over time. And, you know, to recognize the signs of burnout. If people are exhausted emotionally and physically, they'll be more irritable. They'll not want to do tasks that they previously loved. They'll find themselves procrastinating. So if we can recognize some of these red flags, it's an indication for ourselves that we might need rest. And it's okay if you're providing support to somebody to have healthy boundaries, to say, look, you can fill my inbox with what's going on right now. I'm not going to be able to come back to it until after I put my children to sleep or after I take a shower or whatever it is that you need to be doing. Healthy boundaries are an absolutely essential part of healthy community care. And it comes back to that communication point that Dr. Nabil was mentioning. When you're in a position where you're assisting people, you have to have clear and assertive communication, and let people know that doesn't mean, you know, that they're a burden just because you can't answer them immediately. So I just wanted to quickly address that point.
I have a couple of questions that I could address, inshallah. I have a couple how questions, like how can we begin changing the status quo? And I think this is a very important question, but it's a big question that requires a number of answers at the same time. We need to work on multiple levels. There is the level of thought and research. There is a level of deep thinking about the current situation and how we can change it and what's wrong with it and what's right about it and so forth. And that gets into the approach itself, the worldview, where we're coming from the Islamic point of view. There is another level of education where it is important for the Islamic educational institutes to make the right shifts in the content that we educate when we teach about Islam, so that this could be a starting point of change when Muslims understand the role and are active in changing the current situation. Understanding is very important. Awareness, the shaping of the awareness of Muslims and non-Muslims, shaping the awareness of humanity is very important, because one of the major problems we have these days is a problem of awareness and lack of understanding of the reality. Another level of change is on the organizational level, in terms of the strategies of organizations, their priorities, what exactly do they serve first before what they serve next? Do they put the higher goals of Islam as the higher goals of organization, or there are other goals? It's very important in all of these levels to also have a multiple strategy. One of them has to do with the discourse, a critique and a discussion. And another level has to do with the reconstruction of these levels. We do have to reconstruct our Islamic organizations, our Islamic education, and our Islamic thought these days, because it's not possible to continue with the ideas and organizations and the thoughts from the past. And this reconstruction has a science of it in order to Renewal is one of the concepts that the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and that renewal is an art that is very important to practice at this stage. Short answer. Another question has to do with when you have a limited number of medical resources, like the issue of ventilators in Italy. There is one level of addressing this question that has to do with the bigger picture, as I was saying in the lecture. Why is Italy the 7th economy in the world, and it only has 2,400 emergency beds? Dr. Nabil might be able to tell us how much Canada has, but I understand that the number is Canada is higher. The numbers even in some much smaller countries is higher than that. And that is an issue with the bigger system. The system is not fair, and the system is not inclined towards the social welfare in a huge economy like the Italian economy. That aside, as a doctor, when you deal with lives, in Islam, it doesn't differentiate between the old and the young. As my brother in the question said, you don't give priority to the young over the old just like that. This is an economic measure. This is not the Islamic way. The Islamic way is that all lives are equal. And therefore, when the fuqaha talked about this, they had a number of solutions. One of them is the first come, first serve kind of solution, that whoever gets the ventilator or whatever medicine first, then they have a right for it, and those who come later has less right for it. Other solutions that some of our fuqaha, old and contemporary, had suggested is some sort of a random selection between people in order to be fair. But the life support should not be removed from somebody without their will, unless there is some sort of a certainty that that person is not surviving anyway, or is eventually dead in that sense. Eventual death could be measured with brain death and others. I'm sure Dr. Nabil could add to this. Another question that has to do with domestic violence. Our Islamic discourse, to be self-critical here, has been lacking in that area. We have to be very clear that domestic violence is haram, period. And whatever your interpretation is of the verse in Surah An-Nisa, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَضْرِبُوهُنْ, if you translate it as a spank with a siwak, or with whatever, or you translate it as separation, or whatever it is, all the other translations, including the translation of quote unquote spanking, which I don't agree with, by the way. But none of this has to do with domestic violence. Domestic violence, as described today, as our sister Nikita had mentioned, the sad reality that men are going wild in their homes. Instead of reconnecting with their families, they abuse their families. And that is everybody across all cultures. I was just reading a horrific article about deaths in Europe, different countries, because of what's happening. In Islam, all of this is haram, and whoever kills or harms anybody, the only correction in Islam is for that person to be harmed or to be murdered in the same way. This is what the Sharia says in that. And that is unacceptable. We have to be clear about that, so that Muslims who still listen to what Islam has to say, maybe would listen to us. But as our sister knows, and I'm sure our brother, it's a much deeper problem than just a fatwa. It's a psychological issue. It's a social issue. It takes a multi-dimensional, a multidisciplinary approach. That is, one of the things that I wanted to talk about. I have a couple of other fatwa questions. Perhaps Dr. Nabil, if you have comments, and then I could come back, inshallah, with a couple of fatwas that my brothers are asking.
Jazakallah khair. Dr. Jasser, actually, I'm very interested in continuing to hear you. So please continue.
Subhanallah, khair, inshallah. Well, there is a fatwa that has to do with online imams with Taraweeh. And I think the issue of Taraweeh is much simpler than the issue of Jum'ah. Yeah, I personally is one of the voices that did not recommend online prayers for Jum'ah. My opinion was to pray Jum'ah at home or pray Dhuhr at home. Both are fine with me. But online Imam for Taraweeh is easier because in the Sunnah prayers, the conditions do not apply the same way. So the only condition perhaps is to be in the vicinity of that mosque, not to pray Taraweeh behind somebody in a different city or whatever, where there could be like a different timing, or because that is not acceptable from an Islamic point of view. But Taraweeh, I believe, could be prayed online because in the Sunnah, the conditions are much more relaxed. And if you're talking about the Fard or the Jum'ah, only if you are in the vicinity of the mosque or close by, as if you can hear the mosque from a microphone or something, you can pray, inshallah, but not in a different time zone. The higher prices of halal chicken versus eating Ahlul Kitab chicken or people of the book slaughtering. And I mean, there are two sides of this. One is that Muslim businesses are not supposed to use the halal marketing strategy in order to up the price unfairly. This is not fair, and this is not Islamic. That the halal price is just higher for no reason. On the other hand, it's important to encourage halal businesses, especially that they are usually small businesses that are struggling. So it's important to encourage the Islamic investments and the Islamic slaughtering, and etc. But we should also know that it's in the Quran that we can eat the slaughtering of the people of the book. I mean, this is not, regardless of what Fuqaha had debated here. I mean, there is a verse in Ayat al-Ma'idah, and for me, it's just you say Bismillah and you eat. It's not an issue for me. I don't know. It's a big issue in some cultures because of the Indian impact and so forth. In terms of how can people be guided with the Quran if they do not know Arabic? Number of answers to. One answer is to learn Arabic. Those brothers who know me from the 90s when I first came to Canada, I didn't speak much English, but then eventually you learn the language and you start to practice it. Arabic is much easier than English because it's much more structured. And it is a language that if you put the effort, Allah will open it for you. So that's the most difficult answer. The less difficult answer is to read the Quran in your language, in English or French, as you read in the translation. And you will learn so much from it. We heard from Sister Nakita and Brother Nabil, and all of this you could learn if you read about Islam in English. You don't have to read in Arabic in order for you to learn about the ethics of Islam and the stories of the Prophet and the model of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we have, alhamdulillah, so many translations of some mother books, we call them in Arabic, or the seminal works of Islam. We have them translated usually in English. So you can learn a lot. But it's very important that your conceptual framework about Islam should be in Arabic. Salah is Salah, and Zakah is Zakah, and Hajj, and Siyam, and Zawaj, and Zina. And it's very important that the basic conceptions, the basic words in the Arabic language that describe the main duties and the main pillars and so forth of Islam, that you learn them in Arabic, not in English or French, because the language comes with a system. Prayer is different from Salah, and charity is different from Zakah, and so forth, and fornication or whatever, adultery, is different from Zina. Zina has a particular definition regardless of what they do with the English language. So basically, and we see that in the languages like Urdu or Swahili or Turkish or any language that was impacted by Islam, the basic conceptual framework of Islam is there in the language. Salah is Salah, and Zakah is Zakah, and Hajj is Hajj. And we need to do that in English as English-speaking people, to include in the English language, as we have the word Imam and the word Islam for that matter, and the word perhaps Azan or whatever, we need to include more words in the English language so that we speak English with the Arabic concepts of Islam. What other questions? I think these are the questions I have for now. Jazakallah khair.
Allah barak feek. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Jasser. Sister Nakita, did you have any questions or final thoughts that you wanted to give?
There was another question about the maintenance of mental health, but I feel like that's quite a large question. So maybe I can provide my contact information or social media, and I can address that in a longer post or something like that, so that person can feel free to follow me, and I will definitely offer some insights into what we can do for the maintenance of our mental health during the pandemic, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. And any final remarks from either of the speakers before we close?
Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah, I'm not on social media, which I'm happy to be. But I have a website, my first name, last name in one word.net, and you can contact me through my website. So inshallah, I'm more than happy to contact or ask the organizers for my WhatsApp number. I'm more than happy to contact with my brothers and sisters. So alhamdulillah.
Yeah, go ahead, sister.
Yeah, I think I would add that I'm also happy to connect with people, inshallah. And also, I guess I would leave you with the final message of just be gentle with yourself. There's a lot of voices out there talking and putting pressure on what our pandemic isolation should look like, and it's different for everyone. So go easy on yourself and follow your ethical framework, and be kind to the people around you, inshallah. It's a difficult time.
Jazakallah khair. And just final remarks, I guess, from myself, and in part response to one of the questions about some of these leadership qualities that I described are not common in the community. That is true, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ is a unique human being, and not all of us can have all of these qualities, but we can all learn from them, and we can all strive to develop these qualities. And I just want to remind people that, again, when we're talking about leadership, in facing a crisis or outside of facing a crisis, we're talking about the disposition to lead, and we're talking about influencing positively others. And to that degree, we should all be taking that responsibility seriously and trying to emulate the Prophet ﷺ in his leadership to the best degree that we can. Again, trying to develop our character, our competence, and our commitment in whichever leadership roles we are in. So with that, we will close tonight's session. It really was an honor to accompany Dr. Jasser and Sister Nakita and learn from their extensive experience and wisdom. I want to remind everyone that this webinar is really an important initiative for MAC to connect people and for us to come together as a community and to share ideas and thoughts, and to remind ourselves that we remain one community despite the circumstances and the social distancing that we all have to continue for the time being. I want to remind all of you of some of the important initiatives that the organization MAC has been launching and continues to launch. There is a community food share and blood drive campaigns, national campaigns that are ongoing at the moment. There is also a special webinar coming up this Thursday evening with Minister Ahmed Hussein, the Minister of Family Affairs, and that will happen at 8:30 p.m. and he's going to be discussing the government's response to the crisis. We have a full set of e-learning courses on the e-learning platform of MAC, which can be found on macnet.ca, and macnet.ca/connect hub is also another initiative in MAC to try to connect people during this difficult time. Actually, Dr. Jasser's talks can also be found in the e-learning website. So if you want to hear more from Dr. Jasser and his thoughts and reflections and lessons, you can catch it there. And so really you can, if visiting macnat.ca, you should be able to connect to all of these initiatives. This Tuesday evening program at 8:30, these webinars will continue, inshallah, in the coming weeks. The plan for Ramadan from the organization will also be forthcoming, inshallah, across the different chapters. And so stay connected. Please take care of yourselves, as Sister Nikita has reminded us, and take care of your families. This is a time for us to be there for each other, inshallah, and to to be there for our fellow brothers and sisters, both in the community and in humanity. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow the Muslim community to rise to this challenge today and support each other and support our broader community in the different types of need that exist today. With that, we will close. Jazakumullah khair for attending and for being with us tonight. Subhanakallah. La ilaha illa ant. نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.